what we're going to be going over here is an overview of activity-based costing, or ABC costing, and get a basic understanding of what this costing system is. So with any costing here, or product costing, you're going to have these indirect costs, or these overhead costs, and in activity-based costing they refer to them as resources here, and they could be both manufacturing and non-manufacturing overhead costs here. And what we're talking about, the overhead here, is like engineering, purchasing, sales, plant support, and everything it takes to support a particular product that we're manufacturing or a service that we're providing here. So what are the costs that is going to be going into this product or service? Well, we're going to have our overhead costs here, and they have to be allocated to product or service. And then we also have those direct materials and direct labors that would go into the products and service. So knowing our overhead allocation costs here and all our direct costs, we can determine the cost here of our product or our service. So in general here, when we're talking about traditional costing here, we take all those overhead costs that we mentioned here, all those resources that we're talking about, and we would take those costs, lump them together here, and based on some production volume here and some standard rate that we calculated here on those overhead costs, we would add them, or we would allocate them to our product here. Again, this would be based on some production volume here. So what you're going to end up with here is that you're going to have some product cost distortion. You're going to be either under or over allocated this overhead here, because this is the point here with ABC costing. This product costs, that the overhead cost that goes into the product here, based on just the standard method here where you're allocating on some production volume here, the particular product that you're using here may not translate directly, the cost may not translate directly based on production volumes. What it really translates directly to is in what this product actually uses here for those overhead or those services that are being provided here. And so therefore, just using one rate here based on some production volume, you're going to get a distorted cost here for your product. So what ABC costing attempts to do is they attempt to correct that. So what they would do here, taking these overhead costs here, those resources that we mentioned, for any number of these different supporting services. That would be all the supporting services for the products that you're manufacturing, the engineering, purchasing, sales, plant, and so forth. They're going to, based on the activities or the work that they provide here to the plant or for the products that we're manufacturing, they're going to provide some dollar amount or some certain amount, measurable amount here of resource based on the support that they're providing here. So we set those resources up, or those dollar amounts here, or however those allocations are, we set them up into what they call cost pool here. So we would have any number of different cost pools based on our overhead or indirect costs. So we're going to have like cost pool number 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And now the product or service that we're building or manufacturing or providing here is going to consume are going to use a certain amount of those costs here. So the product or service, you can understand, is going to use a certain amount of the engineering costs here. They're going to use a certain amount of the purchasing costs and sales and so forth. So each of those departments that we talked about here are supporting a particular product or a group of products through their activities here, or those dollar allocations that we have to make here. So this, for ABC costing, we call, well, let's just go through it here. For our first stage allocation, that's where we set up, based on all those activities that each of these departments are providing here, we set up a total dollar amount or some allocation of the resource, or some amount of the resource that they're providing here in those different cost pools. So now we're coming to the point here where this product or service we have here is going to actually be using some of the services. They're going to need some of the engineering support, a certain amount of the purchasing support and sales and so forth. So the product itself is going to be using those services, using those amounts here based on some method here that they would go through to define exactly the amount of costs that they'll be using. And they're going to be taking out of these different cost pools that have gone in here for our overhead costs, or those overhead, the resources here, they're going to be using a certain known amount here, and so they're going to be using it. Okay, so this is the case here where we can get a more accurate our overhead costs, we can allocate it to our products or our services more accurate, in an best accurate fashion we can, versus the traditional method here where you have just based on production volume alone, because production volume alone for a particular product is going to either under or over allocate the actual cost or the actual amount of the overhead that's going to be used as support from the engineering, purchasing, and sales, and so forth. Okay, so ABC should give us a better overhead allocation cost here for your different product or your service. And then the other thing is here, of course, the direct cost. And again, those are traceable or traceable direct costs that goes into our products. So, of course, a direct material is pretty easy to trace. Same both for traditional costing or activity-based costing, and same for direct labor here. We can trace that directly into the product or our service here. But the other thing is with ABC costing, there are other direct costs here that we attempt to trace into our product or try to identify any other direct costs, such as maybe a setup cost for a piece of for a production run that's going through the factory for a particular product. We could set that up as another direct cost. With traditional costing, we probably would have thrown some of these other direct costs just into our overhead costs. So again, we would be misapplying it based on the particular product we're using here. It would have went into just a general overhead cost, and it would have been prorated out here on some production volume. So that particular product here would be allocated some overhead cost. But with the ABC costing, we try to identify all the other direct costs that goes into the particular product we're making. So again, they have to be traceable costs, but they were going into the product. So with ABC costing, again, we try to get all these other direct costs allocated to the particular product. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. ABC costing, we try to determine the exact usage here by product here for the particular indirect cost or overhead cost, being the support that we're getting from engineering, purchasing, sales, and so forth. So just going to review that here or to understand that, activity-based costing is used to produce a more accurate product cost than those obtained through the traditional cost system that we talked about. And that's really based on the amount of the resources used or the allocation here of those overheads. Okay, so basic understanding of that. Now let's just go and touch on this here. Just for the logic behind our activity-based costing is really this overhead allocation. So we're back to our schematic here. We got our resources, those are the overheads, and those are what's being provided here by the engineering, the purchasing, sales, and so forth here. And then we have our activities here. Those are the work that's being provided here by our resources or our supporting departments here. And then our product services here. Those are the products or the services that we're providing here, or either manufacturing the product or some services that we're providing here. Okay, so with the ABC logic here is we're going to have these products here are going to consume activities here. Obviously, you need support on your products here to manufacture it, say, for example, the engineering, purchasing, sales, and so forth. So products are going to consume activities here, and the activities here are going to consume our resource. Now, again, our resources here is really the work, these activities that they're providing, the work that they're providing here to support our products. And then, so we got our activities consuming our resources, and then our resource here is generating cost. Obviously, it costs a lot of money to keep all the engineering departments going, the purchasing and sales and so forth. So what we're trying to do here, what we want to do is what creates the demand for the output of each of the company's main activities. So this is what ABC costing focuses on. What is creating the demand here for the output of the activities? The activities here is really the output of our indirect costing here, or those resources that we have, all those different departments. And then the other thing is we're going to have to allocate those amounts here used by the product. So we're going to take the actual amounts of those activities or the works being provided here by our supporting departments, and they're going to go into the product services. So just a basic understanding. It's sort of pretty simple logic here but the idea is you've got these activities here. You're defining exactly, trying to define exactly what activities your supporting departments are providing here for the production of your different products or the services you're providing. So the procedure we go through here, first thing for ABC costing, just rough overview here, we have to determine what our activities are identified here, exactly what work each one of those overhead departments are providing here. We have to list all those activities here, and they're going to go into cost pools, essentially, is what we're doing. And then secondly here, the costs here are traced to these activities or these activity cost pools based on the resources provided here. And it's really, the key term is here a resource driver here. So whatever is driving that, our resource here as work that's being provided here to the product we're making here, those costs have to be traced from our indirect, all those overhead departments or all those indirect departments have to be traced to these activities, and we looked at that earlier here. So we have to know what those costs are here, and they're going to the different activity cost pools. So we have to know those costs, and then thirdly here, costs are traced from each of these activity cost pool to the product services based on the demand that each product or service has for the activity. So these products or service that we're providing here uses, again, consumes those activities. So that's what we're doing. We're taking all these costs, these resources here, we have their resources costs, and we're directing them down first into our activity cost pools, and then they're being used up here as the exact amount that those or best estimated exact amount that those products or services would be using. So again, just go back to this. Costs are traced from each activity cost pool to the product services based on product or service has for each activity, and this is where they're traced by what we call activity drivers here. So here we're going to be using the term activity drivers. Those are where the activities cost pools here are being used here for our products and services, and then our resource drivers here, another key term, that's where resources here are being defined or allocated to those different cost pools. And then by definition here, to get a better understanding here, let's go through it. Our activities really are a type of work or function that's being provided here by those supporting departments. And then the drivers here, that's whatever causes the need for the activities. We talked about our resource driver here and our activity driver. Whatever the cause or need for the activities here. So we've got two things. The resources going in here, and then as a driver here, and then our activity here is going to be going into being allocated here or used by the products. And then this activity measure here, it's really a unit of measure here, this activities here, and it can be, this is the key here, when you're talking about ABC costing, it's just not based on some production volume here. It can be a frequency measure here, that's the number of times the activity is performed here for the particular product, or a duration measure, that's the time consumed for performing the activity. The product here would be costed based on, again, some duration measure. And then we also have the physical measure here for the activity. So that would be the quantity of the resource processed here by the activity here. So whatever quantity of resource is required here, it would be, again, a physical measure. So activity measures, and these are all key here when we start talking about ABC costing and we start making the calculations here. These terminologies here are important. So when you're talking about ABC costing, you're going to have our activities here, really focused around those activities, the drivers, whatever is driving those activities here, either as a resource driver or activity driver, and then again our activity measure, frequency measure, times the activity performed, a duration measure. You can have any one of these here, or any combination of these here, depending on the activity you're looking at. Okay, so, and also the physical measures here. So the other thing is, the key point is here, a key idea with ABC costing is to find the activity measure here. So that's what we're really looking at for each activity that is closely related or correlated to the activity cost involved when applied to the product. So when you're talking about ABC costing, you got this intermediate amount here where you're trying to determine the resource, or those supporting departments here are trying to determine exactly the amount of work and what type of work they're providing through to the product or the services being provided, and that is allocated or set up in those cost pools that we have here. And then the product or service on the other end here is using those activities based on the amount that they're actually using. So that's the key here with ABC costing, is looking at these activities. We have to know the resources. First off, we have to know what these activities are, and then we have to know the resources or the costs that are going into these activities as the indirect or overhead costs for those engineering, the purchasing, sales, and other supporting departments. And then knowing these activities, those costs, then our products here, we have to know exactly how much each of the products that we're manufacturing, we have to know how much of the activity they are consuming. So ABC costing, we try to come up with a better estimate here on the overhead allocation that we have here. So that's really the difference here. And then again, there is some differences when we were talking about those direct costs. In ABC costing, we try to determine all the direct costs here that the product is experiencing here. So we would, instead of just lumping some of those direct costs into overhead under a traditional costing system and then allocating it back through the overhead allocation cost, we try to track our product costs or our service costs is using the direct, all the direct costs we can actually come up with. So again, okay, so this is just an overview or summary here of what activity-based costing is all about.